Welcome to the conversation on TYT. I'm Michael Shure, and today we're going to go to Tennessee, and we're going to talk about in this era of social justice and protesting, exactly what is happening by being sort of orchestrated by the people who don't love a protest. And we're going to go to Nashville now. Brandon Tucker is the policy director for the ACLU in Tennessee. Brandon, thanks for being on the Young Turks.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So tell me, I mean, in a nutshell, let's start out with the easy question here. What is going on? So it's sort of like by cover of dark in a session, the legislature there passed some laws, and these laws are anti-protest laws.
That's precisely it. What's happening here was the same thing that's happening across the country. We bore witness to injustices displayed on television, videos of Black men being brutalized and killed in the streets at the hands of law enforcement. And Tennesseans here in Nashville and Memphis and all throughout the state took to the streets. And they were exercising their right to voice their position and advocate for change. And in response, rather than hearing the message of the protesters, rather than trying to dig deeper to identify why so many tens of thousands of Tennesseans were taken to the streets, our legislature decided to criminalize these acts. There was, I believe there's this belief that they're looking tough on protesters. There's this mood happening throughout the country about getting tough on protesters. But what would have been strength was engaging and trying to reform our systems. But instead, they chose to criminalize these acts, and it showed weakness in my opinion.
Well, it's not just criminal either. I mean, if you think about it, they're treating them as a felony, and they're also saying that cash bail, they're not dealing properly with bail. So you get arrested, this guarantees that just for protesting, you're gonna spend some time in jail, and then you're gonna have to appeal to get your right to vote back, the way I look at this thing. And tell me if I'm wrong, but this seems like it's an orchestrated move for precisely a number of those reasons.
You're spot on. The unintended consequences here are immense. You mentioned the mandatory minimums. You mentioned bail, but if people are arrested for these offenses that are commonly associated with protest, there's a mandatory 12-hour hold. That's a pre-conviction punishment that is typically reserved for those who are arrested on charges of domestic violence. And so the ripple effects are unseen, but they will have a negative impact. If someone is required to spend 12 hours in a jail cell, what if they have a child to care for back at home? What if they have a job to get to in the morning? Our unhoused community, they're saying if you're sleeping on state property, you're immediately taken in for a 12-hour hold. You have a mandatory minimum that you'll have to serve if found guilty. You have an exorbitant fine that you'll have to pay. And virtually they're saying fine individuals' private property to sleep on. So this thing was hastily rushed through. It was not thought through. There were reservations stated by legislators who voted for this, and it's just unacceptable.
And it's also dripping with hypocrisy, even if the hypocrisy is 20 years old. Because if you look back in Tennessee history, you'll see when Don Sundquist was governor, a Democrat, the beginning of the 2000s, there was a vote passed about that they were trying to increase taxes. Republicans and Tea Partiers descended upon Nashville, created this whole wave of protest. But the Democratic governor at the time, Don Sundquist, and the Democratic-led senators that were there, they didn't do laws like this. They allowed the protest to continue, and it really was the rise of Marsha Blackburn, who's now one of the two senators from your state. What is the difference between, what, let's say Bill Lee, who's the governor of Tennessee right now, how he's treating this type of protest versus how protest was treated when it was on the other foot?
I think when you stated the hypocrisy, it's so blatant. I mean, just over a month ago, our governor ordered the flags to be lowered to commemorate the life of John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis. His life and his protest and his service to our country is now celebrated. And in the spirit of Congressman John Lewis, we've had young people and old in the streets advocating for change, advocating for racial equity, racial justice, and reform to how we are policed. And they have completely missed the mark on being leaders in this space and hearing the protesters out. Not once have they come together to put together legislation or put together a commission to deal with what the protesters are actually protesting about. Instead, they are suppressing speech, chilling speech, and shutting down nonviolent protest. And so the hypocrisy is there, and it couldn't be more evident in how certain protesters are treated versus others who are advocating for change and for racial justice.
Yeah, and it's more than just ironic that John Lewis began his studying at the Highlander Folk School there, which was basically learning how to protest peacefully. And then in that same state where a Highlander is, you have a governor and a legislature doing these things. Okay, we know the problem now, Brandon. Tell me what the ACLU is doing. Tell us what some of the remedy is for this.
Yeah. Look, we have a legal department here at the ACLU of Tennessee that is not shy to sue this governor, but we are working right now with our team and also our national ACLU attorneys to find out if there's any possibility to file suit. But to go back to what I mentioned earlier, the governor who signed this piece of legislation said he would do it differently. We had legislators on the committee who said, let's take a step back here and maybe send this to a summer study because I don't want to be acting out of emotions. We've had state senators who feel uneasy yet still voted for the enhancement on all these penalties and making individuals who are expressing their right receive a felony conviction on their record. And so with the policy department and our charge going into the next session, we think that there could be a path to repeal aspects of this law. It's not helpful. It hurts communities. It is chilling free speech, and it's an outsized response to a group of young people who were calling for a meeting from the governor.
Yeah, I don't understand how, and you may know because you work for some an organization that is steeped in legal knowledge, but I don't understand how this does not fly in the face of some of the easiest tenets of the Constitution, from free speech to free association. And I don't see how this would stand up. This wasn't really legislated in the real sense of the word. This was just sort of rammed down the throats of the people of Tennessee, right? I mean, so there has to be some sort of court recourse that you guys have, right?
We hope so. But again, we have to see how this law is effectuated, how it's implemented, but it's not off the table. And again, our legal department is working with a host of attorneys to figure out if there's an opportunity to challenge this law.
Has there been backlash to any of the senators? I mean, if you go through some of the editorials as I did in preparing, you see that I didn't see one newspaper that really supported this, or I was looking in the wrong places, but the Tennessean, a number of them just came right at the state senate for doing this. Is the fact that this is not terribly popular resonating at all, or is it unfortunately popular?
I think we have to make the case, right? We live in a more conservative state, but we value our right to protest. We value free speech. And so I think we need to take off the table what the protesters were saying. And if some may disagree with it, but all come together and agree that we have the right to say it. And so, yes, you're 100% right. This legislation was rammed through. They called an extraordinary session to deal with protesters, not to deal with why people were protesting, but they wanted to ensure that they could criminalize and get individuals off the streets because they disagreed in the manner of which these people were protesting. And so that's our charge. We need to make the case that no matter if you disagree with the message, you should not disagree with anyone's ability to express themselves.
Fascinating. I mean, and you put it so succinctly, and this is exactly what it is. There's something that these people are protesting, but the people in power are not looking at what's being protested, but just the fact that it's being protested at all. All right. So I really appreciate the time. Brandon Tucker's with the ACLU of Tennessee. Good luck to you. Thanks for spending time. Go Bulldogs. And we'll see you on the other side.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.